Meet Phil Sklar, co-founder of the National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum.
Our dream is to make Milwaukee, Wisconsin the bobblehead capital of the world.
At American Family Insurance, we believe your dreams are the most valuable things you will ever own. So today, we're supporting Phil's dream.
If people would like to be a part of the bobblehead dream, we take donations in money or bobbleheads.
Every dream deserves a champion. Find yours at amfam.com. American Family Insurance.
American Family Mutual Insurance Company and its affiliates. 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin, 53783.
Blog Talk Radio. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Bee in Eden, which is being broadcast on Podfire Radio at the website podfireradio.com. My name is SedonaDeb, and I am your hostess and the creator of this show. You can find me on the internet at slaythebankster.com. You can also find YouTube archives of the show, along with links to my written transcript or a blog that accompanies each episode. Now, besides creating the Bee in Eden shows, I also write articles every week for the alternative news website found at roguemoney.net. But if you just remember my homepage address of slaythebankster.com, then you can jump over to any of those features or find me on Twitter and Facebook. I'd like to thank the sponsors of Podfire Radio who are making these wonderful internet programs possible. And let's thank the folks at AmbientMixer.com for the bee-buzz music you hear playing in the background. May the wind blowing through the chimes invite you to buzz along with me as we explore lessons from mankind's past. Our goal here at the Bee in Eden is to begin anticipating our future by remembering our past. And today's episode is entitled Antarctica, Operation Highjump Sent Packing in 1947. This is the fifth installment of our series about the curious events that led to the military colonization of our most southern continent, Antarctica. In the previous episode of A Bee in Eden, we talked about a crazy story of a secret rescue operation carried out by a British special ops team between October and December of 1945 in Antarctica. To this day, an alleged survivor of this operation has insisted that British intelligence had uncovered a fully functioning Nazi military base operating within the ice-covered caverns on the northern edge of this land. We heard the tale of how this team also came face-to-face with something like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch creature who was used in some kind of security role by the Nazi officials. Today we will dive into the next invasion of Antarctica, but this one was comprised of a fully loaded American team of 4,700 men and 13 ships sent under the oversight of the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, and again organized by that famous polar explorer, Admiral Richard Byrd. This invasion was sent under the guise of being a peacetime scientific mission and came to be known as Operation Highjump. This operation was scheduled to work for 6 months. However, after only 6 weeks, the operation encountered deadly resistance and was sent home with its tail between its legs. What could have possibly happened to cause the United States to abandon such a huge investment of time, money, and manpower in the largest Antarctic mission organized to date? We'll come right back after the break as we dive into yet another cover-up of the newly born post-war deep state.
Did you know when you donate a kidney, you give the gift of life?
I had no idea you could donate an organ while you were still alive. If I'm born with 2 healthy kidneys but only need one, and I could really improve somebody else's life, why not? When I think of giving up something I don't need in exchange for a life, it's no contest. If I had another one, I'd do it again.
Visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org. Now you know.
And we're back. As we dive into this story, I'll let you know that the story that I wrote for this tale is already posted on the internet at the Rogue Money website, and if you wanted to search for it, just look for the title, Antarctica Sent Packing in 1947. And we'll have this story posted later with a YouTube archive so that you can follow along, because I do have some extra YouTube movie clips embedded into the story in case you want to follow up. Now, as we mentioned right before the break, our previous episode of this Antarctica saga told the tale of a secret British rescue operation that was launched in October 1945 that came to be known as Operation Tabarin. Now, there's public information about that operation, but then there's also other testimony given by a man who alleged to be a survivor and a participant of that operation. He told the almost too incredible tale of Nazi subterranean bases and hairy polar men. Well, to this day, there's very little information on the internet that either corroborates or debunks that story. Now, historical events that occurred only a handful of months after this British Operation Tabarin point to a dogged interest being taken by America's Department of Defense in whatever was going on down there near the South Pole. So we must ask ourselves this important question. As the entire planet, her financial systems, and her armies lay in ruins during the smoldering aftermath of World War II, why did the U.S. Navy feel this sudden burning itch to get down to Antarctica as soon as possible in the year 1946? What I mean is, we were all told that Hitler's Nazi party had been defeated. The Russians were just beginning to rebuild their defenses, and even then it would be decades before their Navy would be able to technically challenge the maritime authority of the United States. The Cold War wouldn't really be taking off for another 2 years, so in theory, there should be nobody still active on planet Earth who could challenge the military might of the one superpower left standing, which was the United States of America. And yet, Rear Admiral Byrd and Rear Admiral Cruzen were commissioned by the U.S. Navy to lead an extensive show of military force at the southern continent during Antarctica's most inauspicious time of year, the onset of the southern hemisphere's fall and deadly winter seasons. What was so urgent at the South Pole that it couldn't wait at least for warmer weather? Now, in my blog, you'll see that this is the point where I have posted a couple of YouTube links to some important documentaries. One of them is a Russian-produced documentary entitled Operation UFO Antarctic Nazi Base, or it's also known by the title Operation UFO The Third Reich Base in Antarctica. The film contains English subtitles, and the subtitles are adequate to tell the story. However, I will caution you that there are some misspellings over names of people and names of the ships. Now, the second YouTube link I have is to an official Hollywood film entitled The Secret Land, and this was produced under the supervision of the U.S. Navy. This movie came out as a regular Hollywood production out in the month October of the year 1948. So that was 18 months after the Americans were possibly sent with their tails between their legs back home to warmer, safer ports. You might even still be able to find copies of this video, as it may have been re-released during the years in some of the video stores. Now, this sanitized naval Hollywood fluff piece makes no mention of a battle that was fought on February 26, 1947, against UFO-looking craft that emerged from supposed Nazi base the base was named 211, or the number 211. And you are free to debunk both the existence and or the testimony of a man who calls himself Lieutenant John Sayerson, which I will quote in just a minute. I have seen internet forums that attempt to debunk that testimony. However, I have not yet seen anything thorough and convincing. Now, near the 10-minute mark of the Russian film, Lieutenant Sayerson's report is inserted into the film. And there is a webpage link at a site called factsarefacts.com, and they report his words as transcribed from the movie. Lieutenant Sayerson reports, the things, or these UFO-looking craft, popped out of the water like they were being chased by the devil and flew at such high speeds between the masts that the antenna between the wind eddy ripped. Some airplanes that were able to get into the air off the Casablanca, that was the name of a ship, were hit moments later by unfamiliar blasts that came from the flying saucers and crashed next to the ships. I was on deck the Casablanca at the time and was totally taken aback. These things did not make a single sound as they flew between our ships and spit deadly fire. Suddenly, the torpedo boat destroyer Maddock, the name of this ship is either misspelled or its record has been erased, which I will get into. Anyway, this destroyer named Maddock, which was about 10 cable lengths or about 2 miles away from us, went up in flames and began to sink. Rescue boats from other ships were sent despite the danger. And here he concludes, the nightmare lasted about 20 minutes. When the flying saucers dove again under the water, we began to count our losses. They were appalling. Now, supposedly, Operation Highjump then aborted its mission and her crew headed home. Rear Admiral Byrd gave an interview to Chile's El Mercurio newspaper only 1 week after this supposed battle. His shocking statements must have made Secretary Forrestal cringe back under his desk in Washington, D.C. Now, let's take another little break here, and when we come back, I'm going to read to you what Admiral Byrd's statements were that he made to this Chilean newspaper, which has been widely reprinted, and I have a copy of the reprint of this article in the companion blog to this show. But let's take our break here, and then we'll discuss in Admiral Byrd's own words what he was afraid of when this supposed battle of February 1947 happened over the skies of Antarctica. Okay, I'll see you in just a minute.
Work can be fun, but it isn't fun if you get hurt on the job. Wear the proper safety equipment. When you're working outside, drink plenty of water, and don't be afraid to ask for help from your coworkers. Remember, your boss is responsible for your safety. Know your limits and your rights. Work hard and be safe. For more information, visit OSHA.gov or call 800-321-OSHA.
A message from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Not so many years ago, tomato soup and cream of tomato were unusual dishes, enjoyed very much, but not very often. Today, of all the soups in the world, tomato soup is the one most often served. Not because women have taken to making tomato soup frequently. No, on the contrary, few housewives ever attempt it anymore. There's just one reason for tomato soup's popularity, and it is this: the magic, matchless flavor of Campbell's tomato soup. There's a lively verve, a dashing zest about this flavor that people take to at once and come back to and enjoy again and again. The first racy taste of it has a way of arousing a desire to eat, and yet there's a pleasant feeling of satisfaction when the last spoonful is gone. So this soup is a happy choice for the main dish at lunchtime or at supper, and it also is a fine way to start the day's main meal. Serve it sometimes, too, as cream of tomato, made with milk instead of water. You can always be sure that it will be received with pleasure, because this, of all soups, is the one people like to have most often: Campbell's tomato soup.
And we're back. Right before the break, we were talking about the statements that Admiral Byrd had made to a newspaper in Chile right after this supposed battle with Nazi UFOs had taken place in February of 1947. And these are the comments that he made, which I have quoted in the companion blog to this show. Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned today that the United States should adopt measures of protection against the possibility of an invasion of the country by hostile planes coming from the polar regions. The Admiral explained that he was not trying to scare anyone, but the cruel reality is that in case of a new war, the United States could be attacked by planes flying over one or both poles. The fantastic speed with which the world is shrinking, recalled the Admiral, is one of the most important lessons learned during his recent Antarctic exploration. I have to warn my compatriots that the time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our isolation and rely on the certainty that the distances, the oceans, and the poles were a guarantee of safety. And that's the end of that quote. Now let those words sink in, because it's just almost too incredible to believe. What he says is that he learned that there are planes that were able to attack even the United States, and that he learned this while he was in Antarctica. Now, he doesn't mention the Germans or he doesn't mention the Nazis, but we have to ask ourselves, well, if not them, then who was he talking about? And even a few months later, Admiral Byrd was later interviewed on American television, and there's a copy of this episode also linked in the blog. And this was an interview given on a show called Chronoscope that was sponsored by Longines, the jewelry company. And you can tell in his interview that he was probably directed by Secretary of Defense James Forrestal to sanitize his words and soften the tone of what he just said, because you certainly didn't want to get a whole nation of Americans in an uproar over the idea that perhaps the Nazi Party was not quite as defeated as we had been told. Now, I want to go back to some of the points that were made in that Russian documentary film, because that Lieutenant Sayerson referred to the destruction of a ship named the USS Maddox, or it might possibly be named Murdoch. Sometimes with Russian films, they don't transliterate the English words or names the way we would. Now, in the official Navy record, there is no mention of this ship, either Maddox or Murdoch. In fact, there are quite a few ships that have supposedly disappeared or whose records have been erased. Now, Steve Quayle, who has himself become a published author of Antarctica Mysteries, makes this comment on his Operation Highjump webpage, which I have linked in my blog, that focuses on another missing ship record. And I mention this so that you know that it's not a surprise if you encounter names of naval ships that have been completely erased from the U.S. Navy's record. Here's what Steve Quayle wrote. But here's where the story gets interesting. The USS Pine Island was struck from the Naval Register on an unknown date. Her title was transferred to the Maritime Administration for layup in the National Defense Reserve Fleet on an unknown date, and the ship's final disposition is also unknown. Now, he says, how does one go about losing a major surface ship over 640 feet long, almost 70 feet wide, with a displacement of over 15,000 tons? The story, of course, gets stranger still. The Pine Island is not the only ship involved in Antarctic research or exploration to have disappeared. There were numerous others. The question is not so much how many, that is fairly well established. The question is how and why, particularly why. And that's the end of the quote from Steve Quayle's webpage. Now, if the U.S. Navy really did engage with Nazi craft on February 26, 1947, you can understand why the Navy would then have turned to their friends in Hollywood to drywall over the entire debacle. Taxpayers were going to ask why an operation that was supposed to last 6 months suddenly got cut short after 6 or 8 weeks. Voila. 18 months later, the film called The Secret Land, and linked in my blog, was sent out to soothe the public. Keep in mind that a few other notable events happened in between this battle and the launch of that Hollywood film, notably the Roswell UFO incident of July of 1947 and the establishment of the Central Intelligence Agency, which took place in September 1947, and the official establishment of the United States Air Force, which also took place in September 1947. And from that point forward, the Cold War was also evolving into a reality. Now, I'm going to mention the link to the official Hollywood film that the U.S. Navy produced, the one called The Secret Land. And there's something really bizarre that is depicted near the beginning of this movie. One of the eyebrow-raising traditions in many nations' navies is the bizarre ritual that takes place on board a ship when the crew crosses the line. That is, when it crosses the equator during a voyage. And those of you who may have traveled on a passenger cruise ship, I have heard that some cruise lines also commemorate the crossing of the equator with some sort of party or some sort of silly ritual. Now, this tradition of crossing the line is something I believe I first heard about in a British TV film called Chasing Shackleton, or it might have possibly been the film called Longitude. Both productions are worthy of your time if you're getting hopelessly obsessed with this polar topic, as I seem to be. And you can probably find those movies on either Netflix or Amazon Video or Google Video. And I'll mention the titles again. Chasing Shackleton, or another movie is simply called Longitude. Now, in that Hollywood film, Secret Land, near the beginning of the documentary, there is actual video footage of the ritual that the sailors participated in as the American ships in Operation Highjump were headed towards the South Pole, towards Antarctica. I have a Wikipedia page that relates the history of this tradition. It should not surprise us that there would be a mythical tradition that has been handed down from Phoenicians to Babylonians to Greeks to Europeans as yet another memory of a prehistorical antediluvian civilization. And here's the quote from the Wikipedia page. After crossing the line, or that is crossing the equator, the polywogs received subpoenas to appear before King Neptune and his court, usually including his first assistant, Davy Jones, and Her Highness Tridy, and often various dignitaries, who were all represented by the highest-ranking seamen, who officiate at the ceremony, which is often preceded by a beauty contest of men dressing up as women, each department of the ship being required to introduce one contestant in swimsuit drag. Afterwards, some wogs may be interrogated by King Neptune and his entourage, and the use of a truth serum, sometimes something gross like hot sauce and aftershave, and whole uncooked eggs put in the mouth. During the ceremony, the polywogs undergo a number of increasingly embarrassing ordeals, like wearing your clothing inside out and backwards, crawling on hands and knees on non-skid-coated decks, being swatted with short lengths of fire hose, being locked in stocks and pillories and pelted with mushy fruit, being locked in a water coffin of salt water and bright green sea dye or fluorescent sodium salt, crawling through chutes or large tubs of rotting garbage, kissing the royal baby's belly coated with axle grease, hair chopping, and other things. All of this being done largely for the entertainment of the other group on board called the Shellbacks. Now, believe it or not, like I mentioned, this sort of tradition, almost like a hazing incident, is actually depicted in the film Secret Land because it was actually recorded with a camera on these U.S. naval ships as they crossed the equator heading for Antarctica as they embarked this operation called Operation Highjump. Now, to conclude this story, I'm going to introduce what will become the next episode of this Antarctica saga, and this has to do with James Forrestal. He became America's first Secretary of Defense, and the reason why we call him the first Secretary of Defense is because before that, that title had been named the Secretary of War. So during World War II, the official we would now call Secretary of Defense was actually called the Secretary of War. Well, as if all of the above governmental cover-ups, conspiracies, obfuscations, and red herrings are not enough, another tragedy occurred less than a year after this movie, The Secret Land, was shown in theaters. This is the bizarre and still unexplained death of James V. Forrestal, the decorated war hero who served Operation Highjump as Secretary of the Navy. In fact, both Secretary Forrestal and Rear Admiral Byrd did not live long after these events. Actually, Byrd went on to live a few years, but even the timing of his death has been a topic for suspicion and conspiracy. In the next installment of this saga about Antarctica mysteries, we'll take a look at what happened to Secretary Forrestal, a carefully planted diary of Admiral Byrd by a Bank of America operative, and the perpetuation of the original esoteric idea that a Shangri-La does in fact exist down in Antarctica. But we'll have to save all of that for the next episode of The Bee in Eden because the slant of the sun tells me that it's time to return to the beehive. Thank you again to all the listeners for joining me on this expedition as it takes these weird, bizarre turns in a maze that never seems to end. And do visit us at podfireradio.com to find more stories to listen to. We thank the sponsors for their support and look forward to our next venture out of the beehive. Okay, that's it for now. SedonaDeb is buzzing off back to the beehive.
Meet Lauren Askinosi of Askinosi Chocolate.
Our dream is to make chocolate that not only tastes good, but does good. We source our cocoa beans directly from small farmers and share the profits back with them.
At American Family Insurance, we believe your dreams are the most valuable things you will ever own. So today, we're supporting Lauren's dream.
If people want to get involved, they can just buy some of our chocolate.
Every dream deserves a champion. Find yours at amfam.com. American Family Insurance.
American Family Mutual Insurance Company and its affiliates. 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin 53783.
Meet Phil Sklar, co-founder of the National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum.
Our dream is to make Milwaukee, Wisconsin the bobblehead capital of the world.
At American Family Insurance, we believe your dreams are the most valuable things you will ever own. So today, we're supporting Phil's dream.
If people would like to be a part of the bobblehead dream, we take donations in money or bobbleheads.
Every dream deserves a champion. Find yours at amfam.com. American Family Insurance.
American Family Mutual Insurance Company and its affiliates. 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin 53783.